live and direct today from Newmanstown, Pennsylvania on this March the 6th, 2024, here with 24/7 World Radio as we continue to seek to have a host for the radio station. In the meantime, I'm going to give you the podcasts on a regular basis. So welcome to the broadcast today, and it is with great pleasure that I welcome our most erudite resident theologian and historical scholar, Brother George Widger. Brother George, welcome to the broadcast today.
Well, thank you, Brother Eric. As always, it's a pleasure being on with you. And yes, I'll admit to all those adjectives, with the exception of erudite, historian, and theologian.
Okay, well, I'll have to take issue with you, George. You impressed me pretty much. So anyway, it's good to have you. And you always have something new for the listeners. And by the way, I added in my course, my private citizenship course, the information you provided on James A. Farley. And James A. Farley was very important in the papacy's New Deal, that it be shoved down the throats of the American people. And he's a Knight of Malta and a very evil man. So I want to thank you for alerting me to all of his qualifications. So it's in the course because of you, George. So welcome to the broadcast, and go ahead.
Okay, so now you're blaming me for, I see how this works.
That's right, George. There's got to be somebody at fault, and it's definitely you.
Okay, well, fair enough. Okay, so my scripture verse for today is a completely non-controversial one. It's completely vanilla. It's 1 Kings 14, verse 24. 1 Kings 14, verse 24. And this is probably a familiar passage. And there were also Sodomites in land, and they did according to all the abominations of the nations which the Lord cast out before the children of Israel. Okay, most of your, I just have a couple of observations. Most of your modern translations, such as the NIV, the New International Version, will render that as male shrine prostitutes or something along those lines. Because I guess sodomite is just too offensive.
Well, that's what they are, and so, that's what the Bible says, and if that's offensive, why would you change the Bible? Why not just repent? But go ahead, George.
Okay, so anyhow, as you probably know, or your listeners know, I live in the People's Republic of California. Now, as insane as evil as this state is, back in the year 2000, so 24 years ago, we had a proposition on a ballot called 22, which simply stated that homosexuals could not get married. And it passed by 66% of the popular vote, so roughly 2/3. However,
and many of those voters, too, George, were black, what I remember.
That is correct.
That's right. God bless them.
So the California State Supreme Court in Sacramento, in its infinite wisdom, said that was unconstitutional. I don't understand what the rationale was. I guess they're reading the Constitution that was written in invisible ink. So 4 years later, California put another proposition on the ballot, Prop 8, which I guess attained not only national but international notoriety, which is basically the same thing in 22, but it stated in a positive sense. It said that marriage was between a man and a woman, and it passed by 60% of the popular vote, 3 out of 5. Mm-hmm. However, yet again, the state Supreme Court said it was unconstitutional. So on the rare occasion where we can try to introduce some sanity in the state, usually somebody such as the state Supreme Court or the U.S. Supreme Court will say it's invalid.
That's right, because the Supreme Court is the Supreme Court of infamy. They're the Supreme Court of sin, and that's what they promote. Remember, sin comes on a nation from the top down. It's not from the bottom up. And this is a classic example. Go ahead, Brother George.
Okay, so it seems like a fool's errand to bother even going to the ballot box. But that's another conversation altogether. So, anyhow, it seems, at least in the United States, there have been two vehicles by which tyranny has been imposed on the people. a court decision, usually the U.S. Supreme Court, or sometimes a lower one will do it, or by executive order. For example, back, was it 82 years ago, on February the 19th, 1942, Franklin Roosevelt issued Executive Order 9066, which said all people of Japanese descent living on the West Coast, that would be California, Oregon, and Washington State, had to be evacuated.
So that was an executive order of FDR. What date was that again?
Correct.
Huh? What date?
February the 19th, 1942.
And what was the name of that executive order again?
9066.
9066.
So nobody had ever been accused, let alone convicted, of any crime. The only thing these people had done is they had parents or grandparents who were born in the wrong country. That's it.
Well, just remember, there's not one recorded occasion of treason among the Japanese Americans at that time. The other thing is, we must remember that this was a Jesuit order using its Scottish Rite Freemasons to do this. FDR was a 32nd degree Scottish Rite Freemason, and the enforcer in California at the time, who was governor, was 33rd degree Freemason Earl Warren of the infamous and wicked Warren Court of the 1960s. All Masonic, in the bidding of Rome, and in this case against the Japanese, because they had property and they were wealthy and there were some great farmers, so we got to steal their farms. Go ahead.
Well, actually, I did see you make a slight correction. Well, actually, Earl Warren was Attorney General of California at the time. He wouldn't become governor until the following year.
Oh, okay.
He was governor from 1943 to 53, then the Supreme Court from 53 to 69. Just want to make a quick clarification.
I appreciate that. Of course, an Attorney General, he's going to enforce that. And when the roundups are continuing while he was governor, he'll make sure that continues out of California.
Correct. Now, and so anyhow, I have a little correction to make, a little bit of housekeeping before I get into my material. I do read the comments that people make on the videos, and if I'm wrong, people will call me out. I said that Cabrini Green was in South Chicago. Actually, it was in North Chicago. Okay, I know. Since I don't have a good excuse, I'll give a bad excuse. When you read tour books about, say, the Windy City, Chicago, they'll say, "Oh, you need to go to Navy Pier, Sears Tower, Orton Steakhouse, whatever." But they almost never mention Cabrini Green. So I'm sorry. Thank you, whoever made that correction. It was in North Chicago, not South Chicago.
Okay, very good. I'm glad you can be corrected, George. That's a very good attribute that you have.
Okay. Anyhow, speaking of Chicago, they have a new mayor who just took office this year. Oh, well, he's been there for a couple months. He's a black man, and I should have his name.
Chicago is going to prosper, and thank God the blacks are ruling Chicago, because now you're going to fix all those things that those white Roman Catholics have done. So that's good news. Good to hear that.
Well, yes, I definitely should know his name. I know his. Now, oh boy, I have too many tablets.
What is his name, George? What's his name and what's his religion? Where did he go to school?
Well, okay, his name is Brandon Johnson. He's a black man. He professes to be Protestant of some sort. His education is purely secular.
Mm-hmm. No Jesuit connections, then.
I didn't say that. His education, he went to Aurora University, where he got his undergrad and master's degree. So he's 47 years old. Almost, he's almost 48 years old. He's born March 27, 1976. Now, as I said, there's nothing Jesuitical about his background per se. However, his chief of his chief of policy is a lady by the name of Mayumi Grigsby, who was born in Liberia.
Oh, so he's got a black woman, right?
Correct.
Liberian black woman, and she's what now? She's chief of policy?
Correct.
Well, that's all the better, George, because now we
So
got
she
two
basically
blacks running Chicago. That's what we need. We need blacks running all the cities. And so Chicago is really standing out here. So good. That's wonderful.
Okay, so you mentioned she got her undergrad degree from Georgetown University.
Oh, so she's Jesuit trained in communism and socialism, and I'm sure she'll be the typical Negro pawn of the Jesuit order, mouthing what they want her to say for the ultimate destruction of Chicago and, of course, the destruction of the blacks, while masquerading as their hero and savior and coming to their rescue. Go ahead.
Okay, so I just mentioning the Windy City, which is the third largest municipality in the U.S. Well, speaking of destroying jurisdictions, I brought this up to you the other day. The treasurer for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts is a lady by the name of Deborah Goldberg. So
now we have a left-wing socialist communist Jewess. Great. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so she's in charge of finances for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. And she got her law degree from Boston College.
Oh, goody. So we have a left-wing socialist communist Jewess that's been trained by the Jesuits in their socialist communism, so that when she implements it, then all the Jews in general can be blamed. That's a wonderful design.
Well, not necessarily. I mean, they could have simply installed her in that position because she's competent.
Well, I doubt it, because to be in that position in the socialist communist Roman Catholic state of Massachusetts, you have to be a completely left-wing, quote unquote, liberal, progressive communist. You're not going to get there wanting to champion free enterprise and private rights and private property. You think that Jewess is doing that? I don't think so. If she was, she would have never been put in the office.
Okay. So I know I'm shotgunning these topics left and right. So I'll table now. Something you brought up a moment ago at the beginning of the broadcast was James Aloysius Farley. So we have talked about him before, but you would ask me to talk about him again?
Well, if you would, because I didn't know how important he was. I mean, you bringing him up, George, I thought, well, this is important. But man, when I read everything that was written on him, for the most part, to review, I mean, this guy is a linchpin in FDR coming to office, and also the New Deal, which is totally socialist communism. It's the implementation of the Communist Manifesto in America. And so this guy is very, very important, but he's white, a Irish Roman Catholic, a Knight of Malta, and tied to Tammany Hall, which runs the Democratic National Convention. Of course, he was the chairman of the Democratic Party from 32 to 40, and he was also the Postmaster General from 32 to 40. So this guy is a man of power, great power, and he, along with a couple other knights like John Flynn and John J. Raskob, were the real power behind FDR. And also John J. Raskob was a personal friend of Lucky Luciano, who was the head of the Mafia Commission. So they're all working together, putting FDR in office to make it look like a bunch of Protestants were behind the New Deal.
And Jews.
Okay.
And Jews.
And Jews. But got to blame the Protestants, because now FDR, he's an Episcopalian, and he really is the one who did it. No, it was the Pope using that papal slave, FDR.
Okay, so Coughlin, Father Charles Coughlin called it the Jew deal.
Yeah, he called it the Jew deal. That's exactly what he did. They're out there to redirect attention to the Jews when it was completely in the hands of the papacy. A priest out of Catholic University America named Father Ryan, was totally back in the New Deal. So between Catholic University of America in D.C. and Georgetown, they were completely backing the New Deal, and they were going to blame the Jews for it. Yep.
Okay, so a couple of points about James Aloysius Farley. Now, I mentioned his full name, so you can just tell by just knowing that his parents were devout Catholics. So, just give you his context. His dates were the 30th of May, 1888. He died on June the 9th, 1976. So he was 88 years old when he died. And as you said, yes, he was a Knight of Malta. And you mentioned his other biographical facts. Also, he was the chairman of Coca-Cola from 1932 to 1962.
The chairman of the Pope's Coca-Cola, who brought it international to poison the nations with cocaine and lots of white sugar to pave the way for massive fungal infection and ultimately cancer, creating an acidic state in the body of everybody who drinks it. But they knew all that, and that's why they put him up there to advocate it. Amen, George.
No, it was he, Farley, who brokered the deal, who went over to the Vatican to establish informal relations with the Vatican. So he met with Eugenio Cardinal Pacelli several times in 1933. Pacelli was the future Pius XII.
That's right. It sure was. So
now, what is it? So now, as you just said, prior to Farley, Coca-Cola was almost exclusively an American product, but after his tenure, it became an international one. So it's bad enough they're poisoning people in the United States, but now they had to export this toxin all over the world.
That's right. Because it's counter-reformation, and we have to weaken the nations, as Satan does, pursuant to Isaiah 14. Art thou the one that weakened the nations? And so this is one way Satan weakens the nations, by getting them to drink acidic, high-sugar drinks that dehydrate them rather than give them a drink. It's a brilliant plan. And all the movies in Jesuit Hollywood always have a flag trimmed with gold fringe or gold cord and tassels, and also featuring a Coke or an advertisement for Coke. The vast majority of movies out of Hollywood. Yep.
Well, this is something I didn't notice growing up, but I know we talked about the 1963 film, Dr. Strangelove, or How I Stopped Worrying and Fell in Love with a Bomb, which was directed by Stanley Kubrick. The main star was Peter Sellers, and you had Sterling Hayden was in it.
Stanley Kubrick, The Knight of Malta, right?
Correct, and George C. Scott. Well, there's a scene in the movie.
George C. Scott, A Knight of Malta too.
Was he what?
Was he a Knight of Malta also?
Well, I don't know. He was probably a Freemason of some sort, but he played an Air Force general. So there's a scene in the movie where where Peter Sellers, he played several characters, including, was it flight captain or group captain Mandrick? I know I'm probably getting that wrong. And he's talking to Sterling Hayden, who's a crazy general who decides to launch a nuclear war. Okay, yes. So in Dr. Strangelove, you're talking several psyops: airborne nuclear war, the Cold War.
That was pushed by Curtis LeMay, General Curtis LeMay. So that's probably who they were mimicking.
Okay, so and of course, airborne nuclear war, and of course, fluoride. Well, there's a scene where the Americans had to attack a British air base, and one of the characters, what's his name? The mustache. Where Peter Sellers' character Mandrick has to get some money to make a phone call, and so he tells this American officer, "Hey, would you mind shooting that soda machine so I can get some change to make the call?" He said, "I can't do that. because I had to answer the Coca-Cola Corporation of America. And I didn't realize all these things they're throwing into these movies, all these mind games they're playing with us. And these,
sure, of course. Yeah, they love it. And most people that are watching the boob tube don't get it. So they just keep watching it and keep getting brainwashed and programmed to do what they're supposed to think what they're supposed to do.
okay, I'm drawing a blank as the character, but Keenan Wynn, he was the actor, but who was Jewish and Catholic, but that's beside. He was Jewish.
Keenan Wynn, I think he was big in some of the real old movies. What was he in?
Well, his father was. His father was a silent actor, so he was Jewish on his mom's side and Catholic on his dad's side.
Mm-hmm. There's a typical combination: Catholic and Jewish. You get the Jews for the brains and the Catholics for the brawn, and we're going to push things through here. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so did you have any other questions on James Farley?
No, I think you answered them all, George, and I just want to thank you very much for bringing him to my attention.
Okay, so he was a campaign manager for Al Smith in his 1922 gubernatorial race, and for Franklin Roosevelt in 1928. So, because of that, Roosevelt rewarded Farley with these positions: Postmaster General, the head of. Well, actually, he had nothing to do with Coca-Cola, but being head of the chairman of the DNC and those other positions. So,
Postmaster General, which is fifth in line to the office of the president. In case one's assassinated, then you get to the fifth in line, it's the Postmaster General.
Yep. And of course, even though he had no, and that's generally speaking just at a point that's like a political favor.
Well, sure. Yep.
Okay. Well, speaking of, so we're talking about the 1930s and 40s, 80, 90 years ago. But can I just talk about something that's going on right now? Yesterday was Super Tuesday. Here in the United States, we had certainly 15 races, caucuses, and whatever, primaries, as well as several territories and possessions, like Guam. And here in California, now I mentioned politics in this state. The leading Democrat candidate for senator is Adam Schiff, who is a U.S. congressman. And the leading candidate for the Republican side is Steve Garvey. Garvey, as some may know, was a Major League Baseball player, played for the Dodgers, the Padres, and was, a good player. However, I'm not sure what his political qualifications are.
Just remember, Adam Schiff is another left-wing socialist communist Jew. So he's playing his part as the Jew, always being the left-wing communist.
Well, I know that Schiff has been a regular speaker at Loyola Marymount, Los Angeles.
He's speaking for the Jesuit communists at Loyola in L.A. Remember, according to my old friend Robert Dudley, his friend that went to Georgetown was that Jew who went to prison. What was his name? I can't remember. For something. What was his name? Anyway, he said when he went to Georgetown, the Jesuits are communists. Jack Abramoff went to Georgetown and he said the Jesuits are communists. So Robert told me so. Jesuitism is communism, and then all their graduates are socialists leaning to communism. None of them are free enterprise. None of them are laissez-faire.
Okay, and this would have been a glaring oversight if I didn't mention this in terms of, say, current events. Now, over the weekend, Martin Brian Mulroney died, who was the 18th Prime Minister of Canada. He was in office from 1984 to 1993. Now, he was trained by the Jesuits. He went to Xavier College, I believe, I want to say in Prince Edward Island. I had to go look that up. He went to a Jesuit school. in Canada.
Yep.
I wish I could be more precise. So he was also, his daughter Jennifer married John Brownstein, who's a medical doctor. So after she married him, she converted to Judaism.
Beautyism. Well, idolatry is always part of Romanism, and the worship of beauty is part of it. Yeah.
I'm sorry. Where does the worship of beauty come in?
Well, they have all their Greco-Roman gods. They have the women, like with the Virgin Mary and some of these other female gods they have. Of course, the Virgin Mary is not the Miriam of the New Testament, and they have Venus, and all the worship of beauty and the sacred feminine. And so that's Romanism. That's idolatry. It goes back to Jezebel.
Okay, so why do I bring up Brian Mulroney other than the fact that he just died? Well, as I said, he was prime minister.
We have to rejoice about. Yeah, because another socialist, communist, Catholic bites the dust. So we ought to rejoice about that.
Okay, so he was notable for a few reasons. One, he was the last Canadian prime minister of the Cold War. And of course, as we've discussed several times before, and you mentioned in Vatican Assassins, that was a complete Vatican construct. Also, he signed off of NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement. So he basically betrayed Canada.
Yeah, and remember the big pushers of NAFTA. One was Knight of Malta, Lee Iacocca. And the other was another papal Knight of Malta, Billy Boy Clinton, who gave so many military secrets and technology to Red China that they're about ready now to invade Taiwan. But apart from Billy Boy Clinton, giving them all the high technology, they wouldn't be in a position to invade Taiwan, as they're threatening to now. And even Bongino's talking about China's going to invade Taiwan. Well, of course, Mr. Roman Catholic Bongino, because the Jesuits fitted them out, made them wealthy, gave them our high military technology, and of course they're going to invade. What do you expect? I warned about this about 25 years ago, but maybe now people will start to listen. But go ahead, brother.
Well, we're talking about the pending senatorial race, most likely between Adam Schiff and Steve Garvey. And I realize it's all Jesuit theater, but I remember hearing radio ads where trashing Steve Garvey. They said, well, Steve Garvey is too conservative for California. Did you know that he voted for Donald Trump in 2016 and 2020? And he says he has every intention of voting for him again this year. And did you know that Steve Garvey opposes a woman's right to choose?
Well, you know what, George? I think we ought to take all these feminists and all these people for abortion, and we ought to put them on their own little section of California and give them like 40 years. And then and all the homosexuals, put them there too. And then they can sodomize each other to death. They can abort all their babies, and they can, what else do it? They can steal each other's property in the name of universal equality. And so in 40 years, we'll all be dead, and we can just move in and make a real country out of it with conservative Bible-based values, like thou shalt not steal, and honor thy father and thy mother, and a few other things, and that will make for culture.
Well, I don't mean to harp on this, but I was looking at my notes, and last week I was watching a video from the BBC, the British Broadcast Corporation, about the systemic and institutionalized racism in the European Union.
Oh yes, it's all these white people and all these white racists. We ought to feel so terrible about ourselves. Systemic racism. Yeah.
Okay. Well, no. I guess the European Commission on Civil Rights did a 5-year study from 2018 to 2023, where they interviewed thousands of people, non-native Europeans, people from Africa and the Middle East, to see and ask them if they had experienced any sort of racism in this time period, and 54%. So over half said yes. It varies from jokes and crude comments to where people were, when you say blacks enter the metro in Paris or Berlin, people will instinctively, clutch their belongings, and women will hold their purses close to their chest, those sort of things.
Well, yeah, they got every reason to do that.
And
Black on white crime. Every reason to do that. They ought to be saying, no, you blacks can't go to these white countries. You stay in black Africa. And since you're our equals and you can do things better than we white people can, I'm sure you can make a great country, a great continent out of Africa. So that's where you need to go and you need to build it. But don't come here and then scream racism and prejudice when we don't give you everything you want. And the black man has had no greater culture to live in than the United States for the last 60 years. He's never had it this good in Africa or any other place. So now this cry, the systemic racism, you want to call me a racist, then it's time for you to leave the country. It's time for you to go to a country where it can be all black. Nigeria is all black. Cameroon is all black. That's a perfect place for you to live. You won't have any white racism there. He said they're so hypocritical, they like all the perks here, including their white women, that they won't have in Cameroon or Nigeria. Go ahead, George.
Well, I just think, I just need to reassess my view of history. If you look at a country like Sweden, for example, I mean, the slave trade and the plantations flourished there for centuries, particularly in southern Sweden. And after they abolished slavery in Sweden, for over 100 years, they had to deal with Jim Crow laws. And so it's only fair and right that the white Swedes be punished for all their crimes they've committed over the centuries.
Now, what's the truth, George? Come on, tell us the truth now.
I'm sorry, what do you
Swedes never had slavery, right? The Swedes never had Jim Crow, right? Swedes were engaged in any of that. There were no blacks in Sweden, for the most part. It's a white nation that spoke Swedish, has a white Saxon history. Why can't it be allowed to exist and remain so?
Well, okay. So you don't believe in alternative history?
Yeah, the Jesuit revisionist lying history, and they keep shoving it down your throat and try to intimidate you to believe it. That's why they want to do away with libraries, do away with the old books that tell you the truth, like the History of Slavery and the Slave Trade by W.O. Blake. We can't have anybody reading that.
Well, and this problem, the systemic and institutionalized racism, bigotry wasn't unique just to Sweden, but if we look at our neighbors, Norway, Denmark, the Netherlands, Germany, Iceland, it was rampant in all those countries. Therefore, they need to atone for their past sins.
Yeah, when it didn't exist at all, of course. Yeah.
Oh, well, okay, if you say so.
If you want to experience real racism, just go to any black community in this country as a white man, and you will experience hateful racism about the first 10 steps you walk down the street. And if you're a woman, you better be watching out so that you don't get raped. That's the typical savage black community that comprises a portion of every major city in this country. And that's what they do. And any white man that denounces it and attacks it, why, he's a racist and a bigot, which gives them a ticket to continue with their sin and destruction of historic white Anglo-Saxon, Protestant, and Baptist Western civilization. They're the Jesuit weapon for our destruction, and they're too stupid to know it.
Well, on a serious note, I know that I mentioned this last time around, but on March the 14th of last month, Valentine's Day, which is also Ash Wednesday, there was a shooting in Kansas City, Missouri, because I guess the previous Sunday, the 11th, the Kansas City Chiefs won the Super Bowl. And I was just talking
George,
to
what's wrong with that? George, what's wrong with that? I mean, they were having a tribal celebration. And in a tribal celebration, somebody has to die. So are you discriminating against them because they had a tribal celebration of shooting somebody? Why, George, that's not very good of you.
Well, I concur. So Anyhow, as I mentioned, the chief of police there in Kansas City is a lady by the name of Tracy Graves, who got her undergrad degree from St. Benedictine College in Kansas.
And so she's black.
Now,
she's black.
She's white.
Well, she's white.
She's white.
Okay, so
But
Tracy
then,
Graves is a white woman. She's a liberated white woman and a feminist. And I'm going to show all these white men that I can be a chief of police and tell them what to do. That's right.
well,
God forbid I should be any sort of subordinate capacity to a man. God forbid that. Let the men to me. Go ahead.
Well, according to this fellow, there's an article, I guess, in the local paper there. I guess it would have been in December of last year or January of this year. I want to say the Kansas City Star. But under Graves' watch, under her first full year, they had a record number of crimes: murder, rapes, aggravated assault.
Oh, George, your statistics are all wrong. When she became the chief of police, everything went down, crime went down, because we've got a virtuous feminist woman that's a chief of police, and everybody wants to do right now. Come on, that's the real news, George.
Now, I know we've discussed it before, but a similar thing happened in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, when they installed Danielle Outlaw back in 2020. Now, Danielle Outlaw, I know we've discussed it before, but as a quick reminder, she went to Holy Names High School in Oakland, California. She got her undergrad degree in criminology.
Oakland, Savage Black Oakland. That's where I was born. I saw my first dead white man in Oakland. Savage Black East Oakland, man. If you were white, you better not walk down there. They'll kill you. But go ahead.
Okay, so Ms. Outlaw, she got her undergrad degree from University of San Francisco in criminology. So she was with the Oakland PD for something like 20 years, where she was like a senior officer. Then she became the chief of police in Portland, Oregon, until 2020, where she was installed as the chief of police in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
So we'll have her in historically white Portland, so she can be the black woman in charge of white Portland. And then we're going to go and put her up into Philadelphia, which is at least 50% black or more. And she can be the head honcho there of the police chief in Philadelphia. And now, George, didn't crime go down when all those blacks saw, we got a sister. We got a sister here now in Philadelphia. She's the chief of police. We're going to start doing good things, and we're not going to rob, rape, and murder and carry on, because we got a sister that's head of the chief of police. Is that what happened in Philadelphia, George?
Not quite.
It's just another reason to riot, rape, and murder, because calling them out on racism and prejudice. Yeah, there you go. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, just as in 2023, Kansas City, Missouri had a record number of crime by every metric, the same thing happened in Philadelphia. They had a record number of crimes: murder, rapes, break-in, you name it.
It's primarily black. Primarily
correct.
Blacks committing all those crimes. Probably Hispanics involved too, but it's primarily blacks and Hispanics to a certain degree. Not the white people. Generally.
So, well, if I didn't know better, it seems that the people who run Kansas City and run Philly want to install the least qualified, the least competent person possible.
That's exactly what the white power structure wants. It furthers anarchy, riot, and crime to justify the new right. And I'll tell you what, you have all this crime on all these major cities with these savage and Hispanic invaders and these savage blacks, majority savage blacks, committing all this crime, and then you're going to have a justification for martial law when the Red Chinese invade. And when the Red Chinese arrive here, they're going to show you how much they like the blacks. Same way with the Russians. It'll be the end of the black race in North America when the Chinese, the Japanese, the Vietnamese, the Koreans, when all that united Mongolian host invades here, they're going to show you how fast they're going to kill these blacks, as they hate their guts, and they remember what these savage blacks did to their women when these American servicemen were stationed there for the last 70 years. And I witnessed that myself in Germany. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. Well, I have no idea how I'm going to follow that up. It's just like, It's
I'm
just
the only
like
guy on the radio that believes the Bible that will say that. Only one that I know.
okay. It's just that but it's so, and it's not just Kansas City, Missouri, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Portland, Oregon, Oakland, California, Seattle, Washington, Chicago, the Twin Cities, Minneapolis, St. Paul. Almost all your major urban centers in the U.S. are being destroyed. They're being destroyed with crime, and they're being led by people who
And they're being destroyed by
don't
race
know what they're
mixing.
doing.
Yeah, they're being destroyed by race mixing. All these white women laying down for these black men, creating these mulattoes and mulattas that will have their first allegiance to their black parent. And so they're greatly increasing the black population that's taught to hate us white people, take from us, and kill us. And so these white women are participating in our destruction.
So they're doing it actively and passively,
Actively.
such as this
They
chief.
want to show they're not prejudiced, so I'll have sex with you, Mr. Black Man, because I'm not prejudiced. And he said, he's thinking, you sucker, you dumb white woman. I'll take you down, and it's just as much for more to hate you that much more. Classic example is Obama's father. Go ahead.
Okay. Regarding the chief of police in Kansas City, Missouri, Tracy Graves, why is she not home? Why is she in charge?
I can stay home.
Man,
I'm superior, man. I'm superior to these men. I'm superior to these white men. I'm superior. I'm going to be there, and I'm going to tell them what to do. Bible talks about when a servant rules. When a servant rules, the people are going to mourn. It's going to be terrible, and that's what we have.
So it's just like, okay, this is so destructive in a myriad of ways. Even though, don't mean to sound so chauvinistic, misogynistic, bigoted, all those sort of things. However, the truth is the truth. If women are out working, whether it's the chief of police or they're being lawyers or accountants or whatever, who is at home raising the children?
Well, that's what we got the daycare centers for, George. What's wrong with you? Just take them to the daycare centers, and they can raise them there. And we'll be out busy in the office there.
Okay. Now I know I've mentioned this before, or I think I have. That one of the first things the Bolsheviks did when they came to power in Russia just over 100 years ago is they got women out of the home because.
And it was known in Bolshevik Russia at the time of the Civil War. They were having orgies everywhere. It was a total moral breakdown in Russia. And the Jesuits ran the Bolsheviks.
Okay, so they realized we need to create the Bolsheviks when they came to power in Russia. They said we need to create an egalitarian society. I.e., this is simply a fancy way of saying everybody's equal. There's no distinction between male and female. A woman is just as good as a man. She can be a doctor, she can be a lawyer, she can be an engineer, whatever. And so they had to get her out of the home, stop having children, going to university, getting trained, getting indoctrinated, so she can compete with jobs with men.
Yep.
And they also had to get people off the farm. They basically, in 1900, something like 80% of all Russians lived on a farm. So it was an agrarian society. So the Bolsheviks said, we need to have these people living in Moscow or St. Petersburg / Leningrad and various other places.
Which
so
is
they need to stop
of the manifesto, moving the people into the cities. Yep.
Yes.
Well, the same thing here during the New Deal. Get them off the farms, get them to move into the cities, particularly the Yankee northern cities. Yeah.
Okay, so they had to basically destroy the family. They had to destroy marriage.
And they had to destroy property ownership too. The family farm.
Yes.
That has to go.
Okay, so what happened 4 years ago during the whole COVID nonsense? Well, they said, well, you no longer need to have a small business. You no longer need to have your own restaurant or barbershop or whatever. We'll take care of you. if you're going to have a job, it'll be a government position, or it'll be one of the corporations, Walmart, Amazon, Costco, one of those places. So this has been a major push to eliminate small businesses, private property ownership, or the illusion thereof.
Yep.
So anyhow, but getting back, and of course they need to have people stop traveling because that leads to climate change. So people are flying, stop flying and driving. People need to stop flying, driving, and having children, and consuming too many animal products such as meat.
There we go. That's the reason why they had all those fires in Texas just today or yesterday or whatever. We're going to destroy the cattle industry so these people don't have red meat to eat, whereby they can be strong and have testosterone for the men. And we'll put them on insects or some vegetarian diet to feminize and weaken the men. Great idea.
Okay, so could I address that? So yes, so since last week, there have been something like over 1 million acres of land that was destroyed in the Panhandle region, mostly in Texas, partially Oklahoma. So it's to further sicken and weaken the population, but also to destroy cattle and so forth.
Remember, George, every historic white Protestant nation, Baptist people, are meat eaters. We eat meat. O positive people, O negative blood types, we eat meat. We're the workers. So you take meat away from us, and you're going to sicken us and weaken us, and that's exactly what they want to do. And I mean good. Okay. I don't mean all the horrible meat that they produced with their estrogens and stuff.
Okay. Yes. Well, you addressed one of my points. Yes, you need to eat real meat, not that bastardized stuff with all that soy and God only knows what they are putting inside of it. So
and another meat that I was just introduced to was bull meat. Have meat that's made out of a steer, out of a bull, and you still have your testosterone in your meat. And so remember, eating steer meat, when they cut off the testicles of the bull, he has a decreased amount of testosterone. So that decreases testosterone in the men. And if you're going to have a strong manhood, we have to have high testosterone. So we should eat food that's going to build that. That's why we eat venison and elk and other wild game. It's full of testosterone.
Well, this is a disparate point, but ideally, people should grow their own food. I realize that may be difficult for people, if not impossible, depending upon where you're living. However, what they've done in this country over the last 100 years or so is basically having us going from growing our own food to basically being dependent on the supermarkets.
That started with the New Deal, with that filthy, fornicating FDR, who had syphilis and not polio. He started all that stuff, getting the people off the farm into the cities with the New Deal, and started the Dust Bowl because of the policies of the Department of Agriculture. And so we have to weaken these people by getting them off the family farm and not having real chicken, real eggs, raw milk, all the wonderful things that make for manhood and strength and taking leadership and running a country.
And of course, since you're getting most of your food now from the supermarket, you can buy Jim Farley's product, Coke, or other types of soda.
Yeah, so we can get all coked up, and so we can get diabetes when we get to be about 50, and then we get to prick ourselves with a little prick pen and see where our blood sugar is. And, time to have a little insulin, because we killed our pancreas by drinking all the Coke and Dr. Pepper and Pepsi and high fructose corn syrup and all that sin. So now we're dependent upon the medical inquisitors to just stay alive. Great plan.
Okay. And you're talking about what an incredibly wicked man James Aloysius Farley was. Yep. And the sad thing is, most people have never heard of him. They have no idea who he was.
They never hear of the real men of power. The real men of power go unknown, and that's the purpose of this broadcast, to try to bring out those real figures in history that changed history to what we have today in this horrible, despicable, artificial culture and society we have today, with the lack of manhood and lack of womanhood too.
Well, people will know a few names like George Soros. People will talk about him all day and all night, or Klaus Schwab, the World Economic Forum. But who's running Klaus Schwab? Who created the World Economic Forum?
Yeah.
Who runs George Soros?
Yeah. How'd that happen? Think there's any connection to the papacy? Think maybe when Klaus Schwab goes and speaks at Boston College, you think there might be a connection between him and the Jesuits? Maybe. Same with Martin Lucifer King. He used to go speak at various Jesuit universities. To think maybe the civil rights movement had something to do with the Jesuits and John Lafarge, maybe. So these are the guys of power, and they can't be seen or can't be known. We just put these poster boys up, and nobody knows where they came from and how they got this power and who's really behind it.
And of course, as I said, we're running in, it was close to an hour. So you like to close it at about 60 minutes or so?
Yeah, give me another, 10 minutes, George. Make your points, and when I'm ready, I'll close it out. So go ahead. Not in a hurry.
Okay. So, having said that, so I mentioned, Kansas City and Philadelphia, and how it seems as if that there's been a concerted effort to destroy your major urban centers in the United States. This has probably been going on for decades, but it seems as if that in recent years they've been ramping it up. A major vehicle for doing this is rampant crime, and the police,
black on black,
in places like San Francisco.
Yeah, black crime. It's what it is.
Okay, well, thank you for making that correction. But if you look at a place like San Francisco, you know it well because you grew up across the bay.
That's right.
Now, 50 years ago, 60 years ago, people would flock there all over the world just to go to Coit Tower or Fisherman's Wharf or Pier 39. Nowadays, not so much because of not just the rampant crime, but just there's excrement in the street, there's needles, police won't arrest people, and the DAs won't prosecute people. And
now here's how you solve the problem. When somebody comes up to you and you're sitting at a lunch table and he bends over and defecates right where you're sitting, you pull out your 45 and you blow his head off. And then that's a warning to all the other bastards that want to do the same thing. Then you can call the cops and have him scraped off the sidewalk and taken away. Anybody else want to do that? It's real easy to solve that crime because it's not going to happen anymore. They know they're going to get that? Hey, bye-bye, because you're killing me with your bacterial infection of your feces. And if you have a certain infection, I touch that feces, I'm going to get that infection too. So you're indirectly killing me by defecating at my feet. So I'm just going to shoot you and put an end to it, to the glory of God.
Okay. All right. Well, this is being done by design, but San Francisco's had a reputation ever since it's been a modern city, 170 years, how long that's been, of being left of center. I get that, but nowadays it seems as if the people who run the city don't want to provide for basic services. They don't care. They don't want to attract tourists.
And why
they don't
is that? Is that just a happenstance thing, George, or is this planned? And if it's planned, what's the plan? These are the kinds of questions that men who think ask, because the conclusions are very disturbing. And they don't want to come to those conclusions. They want to think it's just coincidence. And people are stupid. Why don't they do that? You fool. This is planned by a white power structure that's erudite, highly educated, and has a counter-Reformation design here. That's why they're doing it.
Okay, if you want to talk about your major urban centers, London Breed, I think she's a woman. I'll give her the benefit of the doubt. She's a black woman who got her master's degree from University of San Francisco. Libby Schaaf, who was the mayor until this year, is Dutch Jewish, and she got her law degree from Loyola Marymount, Los Angeles. So under their tenures, mayorships, however you say it, crime is just gone to the roof
Yeah, the
in their
recidivism.
respective cities.
The recidivism is over and over. You have now career criminals. You don't have career criminals in common law. Common law punishes crime. But because they don't want to punish crime, they want more crime because they make more money and further destroy the culture, the white Protestant culture, born out of the Reformation to bring the world back to the Dark Ages. And what do you have in the Dark Ages? You have dictators, kings with absolute power in their hands. They have no limitation on their powers, and they can have the power to kill on sight. So that's what the Jesuits are bringing to America.
Okay, so you had the situation throughout Latin America, places like Venezuela, Colombia, so forth, Mexico, where crime is rampant.
Do you think the Roman Catholic religion has anything to do with that? Absolutely, because there's a book written called Crime and Immorality in the Catholic Church by Emmett McLaughlin, who was a Franciscan priest. And he shows you in Catholic nations, their crime rate is much higher than Protestant nations. That's a fact. And I wonder why. Maybe it's the demoralization of the women when the priests get them in the confessional and force them to oral sex or some sort of perversion. So the women get debauched of the culture that leads to prostitution and all sorts of terrible things. The women in Catholic cultures are of very low morals compared to the historic white Protestant cultures. Those are facts too.
Well, even to this day, almost anywhere in Latin America, Brazil, Argentina, the aforementioned, Mexico, you do not want to. If you're down in those places, you don't want to leave your hotel with a nice watch on. And when I say a nice watch, something that costs $100, because someone will try to steal it. Of course,
my brother-in-law told me
it's almost impossible to.
My brother-in-law, when he worked in South America on an oil field, he said some guy had a Rolex watch. He had his hand on the car as he was driving down. Some guy ran up with a machete, chopped off his hand, and took the Rolex watch. Yep, that's good old South America. Catholic South America, savagery.
And of course, that's coming here. I mean, for a long time,
it'll come here if we give up our guns. If you don't give up the guns, it's not going to happen here. Because they'll shoot them. Want to do that? We'll shoot you right in the face. So that's what they deserve. That's what they need to get. When they want to do that to you, that's a death penalty. And then you have a culture that's courtesy and has respect and would never do that to you because they don't know who's armed and who's going to shoot you. Amen.
Well, if I could just mention before I give my contact information, I mentioned this fellow Matt who just moved to Missouri a couple of years ago, Lawrence County. And it's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. They do have some crime there. But Lawrence County, as I said, is 97, 98% white. And they don't have the type of crime they have there, say, in Kansas City or St. Louis. And Matt has said that one of the odd things about Lawrence County is almost everybody is packed, doctors, lawyers, grandma. And you're not dealing, gangs have not set up shop there. You don't have drive-bys there. Because the locals.
The people are packing, right, George?
Yes, it's like the Old West.
Yeah. And when I went to one of the meetings here with the local congressman here for a concealed carry event, he had a state police guy doing the talking. All the people there, of all maybe 120, 130, every last one of them there in Lebanon was white. There wasn't one black and there wasn't one Hispanic. So the people that are carrying concealed are generally white.
Yes.
You have to.
So, however, I hear the comments come on the radio whenever you had the event, such as what happened in Kansas City a couple weeks ago, or Uvalde, or wherever. They said, "Oh, how many more times do we have to deal with this? Thoughts and prayers aren't enough. Congress needs to take real action. The time to shed tears is over. It's time to do something. It's time to pass laws. Well,
you mean for guns?
Well, yes. So
got 20,000 gun laws on the books already. How many more do you need? Take all these liberal socialist communists and want to take your guns, and that's as bad as wanting to take your property or any other property. They want to outlaw that property of ownership, and this makes them criminals. That's why in my new nation, when I create ProBaptical, anybody that sits in our legislature and wants to propose a law to confiscate guns or to make it illegal to have a certain kind of gun, you immediately put him on trial. You find him guilty of high treason. You take him out against the wall and you shoot him. And that's the end of him. And you send his body back to his wife or whatever and say he committed a capital offense and he had to be executed. Anybody that calls for the confiscation of guns is going to be executed in this legislature. That's how you put it into it.
Okay, well, something I mentioned to you before, that something most people have never heard of is something called democide, death by government. In the 20th century alone, that was probably responsible, and now I need to qualify, Vatican-controlled governments.
Yes, Vatican-controlled government, because all the governments are controlled by the Vatican. I don't know of one that's not.
Okay, so in the 20th century, democide was probably responsible for a minimum of 250 million deaths. Minimum.
Well, all the wars are caused by the George. All the wars are caused by the governments, and the governments are run by the Pope. So all the wars and all the deaths from the wars are death by government.
Okay, but if you think about it, the number was probably at least twice that. People being killed directly, being shot, being sent to a gulag, a concentration camp, being starved to death, dying of disease, exposure, hypothermia, whatever, but also dying from, fluoride or fourth vaccination, whatever. It's probably closer to 1 billion people.
Sure, of course.
And so even if you're looking at these events, what happened in Kansas City or Sandy Hook or Parkland, even if these were organic events, the FBI and CIA was never involved. You're talking just a handful of deaths.
Because they're protecting these black operations. They don't want it to be known as black operations, Sandy Hook and Columbine. They don't want you to know that was government caused. Why, that would be a problem then, and the military government would have some heat on it. But that's why all the intelligence communities work together for its protection to the detriment of the people deemed enemy belligerents living on occupied territories since March 9th, 1933, when they brought the Trading with the Enemy Act inside the country.
Okay, so specifically,
why don't you go ahead and add some final words and contact information, I think.
Okay, if people have any questions, comments, concerns, critiques, please email me at georgewidger1969 @gmail.com. That's GEORWIDGER1969 If you like me to go over a topic, go over it again. I know I have a number of hoppers that in the hopper that I've been meaning to get to for a while, such as something out of Kansas, but a couple of things out of Kansas. So I guess until we meet again, I guess.
Indeed. Well, George, thank you for being with us, and thank you for that information. Thank you for the spirited conversation that we always have. I trust the listeners enjoy it. And if you want to support this ministry here, just send a gift to my Cash App account, which is Eric, ERIC, John, JON, Phelps, PHELPS. And that's Cash App. I'd be happy to receive your gifts. Or you can donate at PayPal, which is rbpbdonate@comcast.net, rbpbdonate@comcast.net. And until then, when I can finally get some bank account that won't kick me out of the bank in 2 or 3 weeks after I get signed up, and we can talk about bank wires. But anyway, thank you for being with us today, and I trust that you'll support the broadcast. Need your prayers 2 minutes every day, lifting up holy hands without wrath and doubting. as we continue to contend for the faith once delivered to the saints, while exposing the Jesuit orders designed to destroy historic white Anglo-Saxon Protestant Western civilization and fulfilling their counter-Reformation designs of bringing us back to the Pope's Dark Ages, where all you had was military dictators, tribal chiefs, and absolute tyrants subject to the Pope. So until next time, may the Lord bless you as you read his word, the AV 1611 Reformation English Bible for English-speaking people. So until then, Maranatha.
Well, take care, brother.